And so as you learn how to do this, as you practice this, you learn how to recognize what layer somebody's at and to sort of help them unfold the deeper layers by asking certain kinds of questions like, where did that come from? If somebody told you a preference, or by asking things like pinning it to a place in time. Oh, okay. So back to that time that you were in the airport with your grandma, that would help. It's just trying to help somebody get at their own interior cognition.
Fractional is for world-class consultants in AI, software engineering, product, and design. Indi Young is a solution strategist who uses purpose-focused qualitative data science. She created her method over a 30-year span and teaches that method in courses, coaching, workshops, books, talks, and through working with teams on research studies. She was one of the founders of Adaptive Path, the pioneering UX consultancy. Indi has written 3 books: Time to Listen, Practical Empathy, and Mental Models. She's at work on another book in the series called Toward Variety, which covers thinking styles. Indi's method is focused on people, not users. She pioneered opportunity maps, which are mental model diagrams of people's approach to a purpose, aligned with the support a solution provides or doesn't. In this episode, we talk about how to conduct listening sessions, how to practice rapt attention, and how to unpack interior cognition to influence business and product strategy. This is Alexis, your co-founder from Swarm. Thanks for listening.
Hey, Alexis.
Serial legendary author here, part of one of the first UX consultancies in the world. So Indi Young, welcome to Fractional.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everybody.
Okay, so Indi, can you please try to introduce yourself? But I'm sure you don't need to put up this. But as you see yourself,
as I see myself, I'm trying to help everybody in the community, help their teams and their leadership understand that there is a very powerful way that we can understand people and support them better. Now, if your organization is not into supporting people, then you can ignore me. But if your organization is into supporting people, as many of them are, then looking at things from the point of view of a person's cognition and emotions as they're addressing a purpose is an incredibly helpful and clarifying way to measure your own work, to set, guiding stars and strategies, to see how well you're providing value to people and to help communities, if you're helping communities, design alongside you.
All right, that's a great intro. So I want to dive right in. You wrote 3 books, and they're very well interconnected, like mental models, practical empathy, and the most recent one was, I think, deep listening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that struck me in the latest book was that you said witness is greater than explorer. I've been there. Sorry, Time to Listen, right? That's the book. Sorry, you said that UX researchers can sometimes act as colonizers in discovery. What was your thought process when you wrote that line?
Well, a lot of us learn on the job. We aren't necessarily trained as ethnographers. That's fine. It's not a problem. But I think one of the things that's sort of missing is that we learn the tactical how to do this without learning necessarily the why or the what behind it, the foundation behind it. And so often our managers will ask us, hey, go, do this experiment and see if people respond better to this one or that one. And you will then start thinking of people as like little mechanical bits to your process of getting that answer for your manager. I don't use experiments. I don't use A/B testing. I don't use any of that in strategic research. What I'm interested in is, where should we take this organization? What's next? What are we missing? Who are we harming? Where are the cracks in our market? How do we innovate better? How do we measure our innovations or the things that we've already created for people? And so as we're trying to do that, we need to make sure that we don't put our own worldview on what's out there, on what people are actually thinking and feeling and the decisions that they're making. We need to try not to let our own cognitive bias or our assumptions sort of color that. And not a lot of people who are learning on the job they know, yeah, that's something I shouldn't do, but they don't have a process for avoiding it. So
like
I've got a
no
process.
framework usually, or if they do, they're kind of misusing it without regard for more important things,
I
I
think
guess.
people are trying. They're trying their best.
Mhm.
That's all we can do, is try our best. But if we can sort of focus on the fact that this other person is so valuable as a human in the world, so valuable just by being. It's even a hard thing for us to think about
It's very
ourselves.
philosophical, right? Like, to be, what does that mean?
Right, to be. It's okay to just be, but a lot of us, we will measure ourselves by how well we do projects, or how many projects we get done, or how happy we make our employer. And I know that's not true in all cultures. That's definitely true in the US culture. There are other cultures where your friend group, you don't even know what they do for a living. So it's just not a career is not a part of that relationship that you have with your friends. But by the same token, a lot of us are kind of wrapped up in, we need life balance and everything. But part of it is that we want to do the best we can. And we want to, I guess we get our own self-worth out of doing the best we can. But if we can put some guidelines on that, we can do the best we can, while at the same time making that other person, that all those people that we're trying to understand, be them, right? Instead of thinking of them, there's always this sort of researcher participant or researcher subject kind of relationship that you could fall into. And with listening deeply, what I'm trying to do is set up like a few artificial rules that make it so that we don't fall, or have less of a chance of falling into that relationship. Often, when someone agrees to be a part of research, they will expect a set of questions, and they will try to answer to the best of their ability to help that researcher, to give that researcher what they think the researcher is after. They're kind of holding up their end of the bargain, right? Not everybody does this as a person who's participating in research, but a lot of people do. And that's how we end up with a kind of a unclear view of what's going on for people. They're trying to give us the answers they think we need. And so it's not necessarily what they think. Also, the questions that we ask are asked using our organization's worldview, very much with our solutions in mind. So early on in my own career, I tried to divorce the solution from the person that I was doing a listening session with. I tried to say, okay, well, what's the possible reason that you might be possibly reaching out for this solution or other solutions like it? Because there's always a reason. There's never a technology that never had a reason before in the eons that humanity has been around. Even when email came out, I mean, we've been writing letters to each other and communicating for centuries. So there's never a solution that drives people's cognition. It supplements it. There's always something that already exists there that they're trying to get done. And this might be a good way to do it, but they might also do it with other ways. Like, for example, I like to talk about the idea of someone who's taking care of a parent. Maybe the parent has issues or can't get around very well. They're doing a little bit of caretaking. And that parent, maybe they need to make sure that that parent has food or takes their meds or gets to their appointments or what have you, right? Now, as we're doing that, the idea is that we might just do it off the top of our heads. We might do it based on what we remember a friend saying. We might ask our friend, hey, when you were doing that, I think I remember you said you did such and such, and sort of like get tips from the friend. We might do it by looking up, how do I keep track of what medications they take? Or let's look up and make sure there's no drug interactions. We might, reach for ways to entertain the parent, maybe getting them their favorite books from the library. Playing a puzzle, solving a puzzle with them or something. So there's a lot of solutions out there. I just named a whole bunch of them. None of them are technical. Some of them are memory based. So
It's like
yeah.
to us product people, typically what I associate your framework with closely is like the jobs to be done framework. Like there's always a job that people are trying to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And with how you frame the mental model with inner thinking, slash reasoning, the emotions involved, and guiding principles, those
Mm-hmm.
really do set up the core for different solutions and alternatives.
Right.
But
Right.
what's important is what problem are they trying to solve?
Yeah, exactly. That the idea of having this kind of artificial way of thinking about it, coming at a listening session without a list of questions, realizing this human is a full human and has a lot of ways of already solving this. And I want to know what goes through your mind as you're solving it. I don't care what tools you're using. I don't care if you're not using anything digital or hiring any services. I just want to know what goes through your mind, because that's going to give me, when I look at it across all the other humans that I listen to who are also taking care of their parents, that's going to give me an insight into affinities or patterns. That's going to give me some understanding of, like, what are the different approaches? What are the different philosophies people bring to this? And do my solutions, once I align them with these approaches and philosophies, do my solutions solve for all of it? There's often stuff that's left out. So, one of the things that I use as an example is a study that I've been doing ongoing, which is to have people do listening sessions with each other about what went through your mind when you were in a close call or a near miss accident. I don't care if you were on foot. I don't care if you were swimming, driving a car. It doesn't matter. Near miss accident. And I get all these stories and I get to go through them and kind of see what are all the parts of what goes through a person's mind. And oftentimes there's a part where it's very emotional, obviously, when you're in the moment, but also afterwards. Like this idea of feeling relief that it's over, or feeling like I have to do something so that it doesn't happen again. There's a lot of gratitude for other people helping you out in the near miss accident. And if you look at that, if you're an insurance company and your goal is to reduce claims, you look at that, you're like, great, they're relieved. They're feeling grateful to the other people. But if you pull those emotions in with the other thoughts that have affinity with them, where the person's focus of mental attention is, you suddenly see something that says, Make sure an authority knows about this so that they can change something so it doesn't happen again to anybody else. You might see another thing, which is like, make a change in my own life so that I never repeat that particular practice and get in that situation again. Those are two things that would really help reduce claims. And now suddenly the insurance company has these two new areas where they could kind of think about innovating in a way that's completely outside of their typical solutions.
More often than not, people are in the frame of thinking that's very transactional, coming with a list of questions, being very obsessed about, oh, this new automated claims process that we've created, without really uncovering the story and
Mm-hmm.
the core motivations that's
Yeah.
driving specific behavior. In that case, typically it's quite hard for teams, product teams, consultants, as these days designers are like all in on Figma. Like typically, it's rare that designers also have the skill of, cognitive empathy and listening
It's
deeply.
not that rare. I
Um,
think I'm a developer at heart, and developers have a ton of cognitive empathy. Designers have a ton of cognitive empathy. I think anyone who can recognize that there's another human in front of them that has their own thought process and not judge that thought process is capable of cognitive empathy.
what are the best ways to start practicing a more advanced version of listening? If people are just starting to get into it.
Yeah, yeah. And it is something that you can practice and practice and practice and get better at, but you will never be perfect. It's kind of like a religion, right?
Mm.
We're just always practicing. It is a practice. And one of the first things that I teach people how to do is recognize the parts of a conversation that you're having. So the parts, if you're, so one of the things is we start a listening session by asking someone just one predefined question. It's called a germinal question. That means it's a seed, and all the rest of the conversation is going to germinate out of it, grow out of it. And so the one germinal question is something that you define in advance. It is a representation of the frame for your study. So let's say your organization wants to figure out why people are dropping off the service, right? You could go and ask people who dropped off, why did you drop off the service? And that would be helpful. What went through your mind as you dropped off the service? But it would also be helpful to talk to them about that purpose the service played, right? So
Like
you mentioned
the
job.
actual reason why they get them
Yeah,
the first
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's say the service was buying a CD or an annuity to earn a
Mm.
little bit more interest on your money, right? And people
Mm.
are dropping off. Well, maybe they're dropping off just because that's the end of the CD and they're done and they got
Mhm.
their money and now there's somebody else who's offering better interest rates somewhere else. And so their thinking is, I'm just going to go wherever the best interest rate is for the next period of time.
All right. I
So
think
that,
I cut you
yeah.
off when you
Oh,
said
no.
I mentioned jobs to be done. Feel
Yeah,
free to
I
continue
was
your
going to
thought
say with
process.
jobs to be done is sort of the same thing. With jobs to be done, they define it as a job. I don't like to define it as a job because I want it to include more. I want it to be
Mm.
elastic and include more than just a thing someone's trying to get done and then it'll be done. I want it to include things like that last a long time, like taking care of your parent might take a number of months or it might take the rest of their lifetime. Um, Building your career is hopefully going to take many decades.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's also stuff that you're actively putting off. such as if you get a diagnosis and you're like, no, that can't be happening to me, you might want to put it off for a little while until you can wrap your head around it or your heart around it. I
So that's
want it.
a
Yeah.
procrastination pattern.
Yeah, exactly.
And I tag it.
Yeah. But so often we ignore those people entirely because we're like, don't procrastinate. And that's just us and our thinking style saying, hey, that your thinking style of being in shock and trying to wrap your heart around it is bad. And we should be able to support these people through this. By supporting them through this, maybe we'll have better outcomes, medical outcomes for that person, mental health outcomes for sure. Right? So the idea is that I just want to expand a little wider. If the word you guys use in your organization is jobs to be done, call it a job, that's fine. You can call it a goal, that's fine. I call it a person's purpose because I wanted one of these weird words that sounds really big so that it reminds you that it includes things that are everlasting or that are not quite started or that you're sort of like, I don't know, should I do that? Should I not? I'm just sort of getting started thinking about it, but I have had some cognition about it. And that means when you're recruiting people that you can hear from, you need to make sure that they've done a bunch of cognition about it. And by cognition, I actually mean inner thinking, emotional reactions, and guiding principles about that purpose, enough to fill a good amount of time. What is a good amount of time? Depends. Could be 20 minutes, could be 30, could be 50, could be 60, could be 80, could be 120. I've had listening sessions that are 120 minutes. Because like the purpose there was what went through your mind as you did a personal identity change, which is kind of a once in a lifetime thing. People
It's incredibly
change.
complex with
Yes.
its own
Yeah.
life cycles and journeys and
Yeah.
cognition changes
Yeah.
over the course
Exactly.
of
And this
different
whole,
milestones.
yeah. And they've done a lot of thinking about it, and they've actually come out the other end of it. We didn't want someone who was just getting started. We wanted the whole bit. I've also done 2-hour listening sessions with people who founded companies. And there's, the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where there's like the little porridge bowl and the medium porridge bowl and the big porridge bowl and blah, blah, blah. Same with framing a study. So sometimes you can go really narrow, like what went through your mind during a near miss accident, or you can go really broad when you don't quite know what people's purposes are just yet. And you need to sort of get a taste of everything. So with the founders, it was just like, what kept you up at night over the last 3 months? Super broad, but it got us a lot of sort of territory. We could see a long landscape, and then we could dive in on certain areas.
When you do decide to dive into certain areas, what are the associated steps involved?
Yeah. So the whole thing is kind of fractal or meta or whatever word you use. Like it exists, but it can exist in a lot of different sizes. So if you did a really broad one, you would still go through all the steps. You would try to define what the person's purpose is. We don't know. So we're going to ask this broad question, what has kept you up at night? Okay, but who? Who has done enough cognition about this that we will get a lot of good depth from? A part of recruiting is actually having a little intro session with the person. First of all, you want to make
the safety.
Safety. You want to make sure that
sure.
they're comfortable talking to you, that they trust you a little bit. Like you can tell them what this is for. You can tell them a little bit like this is going to be your story. I don't have a list of questions at all. And, if that person is able, you do a little test question. And if that person's able to speak at that deep level about what went through their mind, then you're like, hey, let's set up an appointment when is good, right? Let's set aside an hour. Let's set aside 2 hours, whatever it is that we might need. We might not fill it all up. And the thing is that, yes, there are going to be situations where a person can't tell you their cognition because it isn't, often it's because it hasn't been long enough for them to really recognize what happened in their mind. Or they have a thinking style where it doesn't translate to words, it translates to imagery better. And so you might say, hey, you're an important person I want to hear from. Let's do this via imagery and see if I can reduce to words. Right? So
That's
there's
very interesting, right?
yeah.
Like there's no, auditory, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some people are not articulate but have
Mm-hmm.
done the cognition
Mm-hmm.
uh required
Yeah.
to
A lot of
to guide
researchers
the
will
purpose.
will will prompt with photos. So have the person take a whole bunch of photos or videos or whatever, and they go through those videos with that person and say, what was your thinking when you were in this context, the context of this photo or this video? And that also helps. But, the other thing is that we don't have to do it by spoken word. I also, in this intro session, try to figure out, hey, would you feel more comfortable doing this by text messages over the course of a week or something? Would you be more comfortable if I was there in person? Usually I do these things remotely,
Mm.
but, I want to try to understand what works for that person.
How long are they? Would you say they're feasible for more, you know, uh enterprise level organizations, or like are they for government institutions, or can a small
Yes,
startup who's a
yes.
like solo founder do
And
this?
yes. Yes to all of that. So the thing after doing your intro session, deciding whether you want to do a listening session with this person, is to do the listening sessions. And often you'll have a few other people, if you're a solo entrepreneur, but you have a few other people to do listening sessions in parallel. That generally, like, doing all those intro sessions, finding people, setting up the calls, and doing the listening sessions takes about 3 weeks. And that's 3 weeks where it's like 10 hours a week of your time, because we all have other stuff on our plates we need to get done. If you're lucky
For
enough to
sure.
have a project manager, then you can hand a lot of that over to them and, pack your schedule. But one of the really important differences is that because this is deep work, because we want to make a safe space for a person, we only do one listening session a day, maybe two. That's why having a team of people doing these and then getting all those transcripts into a repository is really helpful. But even if you're just a solopreneur, that's fine. Get on the phone with somebody once a week, but always the same purpose. So there are product leaders out there who are like, yeah, get on the phone every week with a couple of customers. The problem is they don't specify the frame. And so there are data
What
that
does that
comes,
mean?
they don't specify the purpose. So like one person might be talking about something and the other person that same week might be talking about something completely unrelated cognitively. Their purposes are totally different.
So
For
does this mean
example,
that
yeah,
there's no qualifiers
yeah,
set when choosing
yeah,
I mean for recruitment, right?
yeah,
Like
for
you talked
recruitment.
about a certain amount of recognition.
Yeah.
You've thought about this for like 5 days.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
uh,
And it's got to be that purpose, that one purpose. So if you are a fast food company and you want to talk to a bunch of customers, you can do that, but it's not going to help you. You're going to get stuff all over the map. It's going to be anecdotal, and you can't make a strategy off of that. What you need to do is say, hey, what's the purpose that we're studying? Let's narrow it down. Let's say the narrowed down purpose is get lunch for myself on a busy day. Okay.
that's
My,
very interesting because
yeah,
like most people's what do you call this, start the recruitment with, you know the usual stuff, psychographics or like
Yeah.
demographics,
You
and
can
those kinds of
add
stuff. Or
that,
yeah,
but that's not where you start. You start with the purpose, and then you can add those kinds of things. But the whole point is that cognition, somebody's inner thinking, emotional reactions, guiding principles are not driven by their demographic. They're driven by their experience. If their experience is discrimination based on something demographic, they're going to have inner thinking, they're going to have emotional reactions, they're going to form guiding principles. Right? But the demographic itself isn't driving those things except in like a discrimination kind of point of view. Like if you're
for sure.
in a wheelchair and you encounter yet another set of stairs and no way up, that's going to cause emotion. That's going to cause inner thinking. You're going to rely on your guiding principle about how to deal with it. You're going to rely on your guiding principle about how to deal with your emotions about it.
Should we name like guiding principles, right? Because when after you collect the data with your transcripts and everything, and you tag this as, oh, okay, this is a guiding principle. How do you usually associate it with what the actual guiding principle is?
So a guiding principle is a personal rule. It's not a value. So there's no actual behind it. It's your personal rule. So Alexis, when you get up in the morning, you probably follow a few little guiding principles.
Make
Those are
sure I drink my anticonvulsant medication.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't get seizures. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Right.
I see.
So there's a personal rule. Now that might have been something that someone told you to do, but it's become a personal rule. You might have a certain way that you do it, like not after I eat eggs,
Mm.
right? That's a
And
personal.
then you
That's
probe for that
yeah,
during the interview itself.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You probe for that. So during the listening session, that's what this whole book is about. There's a whole chapter on what do you do inside the listening session. It defines the idea of being in session mode versus memory mode, helping the person back in time to when they were addressing that some part of that purpose and helping them recount to you what was going through their mind. So
Oh, I think your sentence structure there is like, uh, what has been on your mind this past like time frame about specific purpose,
yeah,
or
yeah.
is it still like, does the germinal question typically still apply further on in the session?
I can get into that. You've got two questions here. One is like this idea of permeable boundaries.
Mm.
But the first one too is that I always couch it very solidly in the past, not what is going through your mind, but what went through your mind. That's a technique that I
Why is that?
use.
Why is that? Why
I
is that?
can help people get at their interior cognition more easily. If I ask you to generalize what your interior cognition is every time you go to the airport, right? You're going to remember some things, but not everything. If I ask you about that time you went to the airport when you were taking your grandmother, right? What went through your mind there? You have a little bit more of a grasp on it. So that's why I couch it very specifically in the past. Generalizations are not quite interior cognition. Sometimes, if we
Mm.
don't have real deep interior cognition, we'll use the generalizations, but generalizations are not what we're after. And it's also very difficult for a person to feel really comfortable in a listening session when they're just generalizing, because they feel like, oh, I'm just sort of like beating around the bush, going in circles. Am I giving you what you want? That's the question you'll get.
It's like I think that's your descriptive layer, right?
Yeah.
And then you have things like opinions,
Mm-hmm.
preferences,
Mm-hmm.
um, what at the heart of the matter, like what we love, is always related to inner thinking,
Yeah.
their emotional reactions and guiding principles.
That's one of the little examples that I use in the book. I'll show that where I
Mm.
use one of these. I don't know if you have these candies in every
Oh,
country, but
yeah.
they're kind of spherical candies and they have different layers. And the
Mm.
interior layer, that's where we've got the inner thinking. But what you were just talking about was like, we've got a descriptive layer kind of around the edge of the candy. And then the next layer in is our expression layer. Like we're going to tell
Yeah.
people our
The
opinions and
flavor.
preferences. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. And so as you learn how to do this, as you practice this, you learn how to recognize what layer somebody's at and to sort of help them unfold the deeper layers by asking certain kinds of questions like, where did that come from? If somebody told you a preference, or by asking things like pinning it to a place in time. Oh, okay. So back to that time that you were in the airport with your grandma, that would help. It's just trying to help somebody get at their own interior cognition. It's not necessarily easy to get at it when it's a purpose that is habitual. So I did a study once about people cooking. So we defined the people that we recruited as creative home chefs. They felt that they were creative cooks. Now, your definition of creative in cooking might be different than another's, but this is how they felt about themselves. And the problem with cooking, especially if you do it a lot, is that you don't think about it. So it's really hard to get past generalizations and to get into something very specific. So we'll do a listening session where we try to pin them to a place and time, like have them write down the dinners that they made. It was all about dinner. There were a bunch of other things, like it was dinner for themselves and a partner or a kid, but not a dinner party, right? There are some different things that we defined there. And we had them write down those dinners so they had to remember, kind of what I made. And we did a listening session. And we also did an in-person session as they cooked another dinner.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
really immersive.
Yeah.
Very ethnographic.
It was basically because cooking is so habitual. We don't have to do that for everything.
The qualifiers you set in the recruitment process determine a lot of the research. So that's something everyone needs to be careful about too.
Yeah. Framing your study is hard, is really hard. Like people ask me, how long does this take? And I'm like, oh, well, it can take us up to 2 months to frame a study. Often it's like 2 weeks.
Why is that?
Why is that? Because often people don't know what they want to understand. They just know that they need strategy, and there's like 5 different areas that they need strategy in. And can we, marry 2 of those together in one purpose? Or is that more or less important than that other thing that you need? Because we can't do it all at once. Yeah.
For sure.
So that might take 2 weeks. The recruiting and setting everything up might take 2 weeks. Doing the listening sessions themselves might take 2 weeks. And then we do the data analysis. And that generally takes 4 weeks. Once we've got that done, we'll do some thinking styles off of the same data. The qualitative data analysis that I'm talking about that takes 4 weeks is to make the mental model skyline. You don't always need that. You can just make thinking styles, or you can make the mental model skyline and not make thinking styles. They're both coming from the same data. They're just 2 different ways of working with that data. And
so for the people unfamiliar with these 2 concepts, what's your 101?
A mental model skyline looks like a city skyline. And when you think of your org's product map, when you're thinking of roadmaps, when you're thinking of, North Stars that you're trying to follow, they're almost always based on the solutions you have. The mental model skyline is not based on solutions. It is people's cognition as they address a purpose. And you line up your solutions underneath those towers. I'll just show a quick picture of it from the book. So you're lining up, you can see the top part of that looks like a city skyline.
Yeah.
And underneath it, you can see long, skinny lines of solutions. And those solutions are what support that tower. And those are the solutions that we measure by thinking style to understand which thinking style are we not supporting very well or harming. And, where do we want to innovate? Where are the gaps here that we can deal with? So the main thing that we're doing is that we're turning it on its head, and our solutions are underneath now. They are support for the people's cognition. There might be part of their cognition and how they address their purpose that we're never going to support. Fine. That is always going to be a gap. But the big reason that we do this, not only to innovate, is to be able to offer multiple varieties of solution for multiple thinking styles. Same back end, different front ends, different language, maybe different modules of the back end that apply to the thinking that goes on for that thinking style. So maybe there's a whole part of this city skyline that only one thinking style or only two thinking styles engage in, whereas the rest of it is all three or all four thinking styles. There's never that many thinking styles, 3, 4, something like that. And the idea is that we're not going to force everybody to use one solution, the one that kind of like doesn't fit anybody, or more likely, the one that fits the idea your team has of people and it doesn't fit anybody else.
I think the way you described this entire approach is inclusive product strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that now with, accommodating all thinking styles, seeing the tower of mental models. It really gives you a clear picture on where you want to attack
Mm-hmm.
in the solution space.
Yeah.
That's super helpful for founders and
Yes.
people who are decision makers.
I've had founders use this to do a pivot when something isn't working at all. What their original idea wasn't going anywhere in a market, and they use this to pivot because it's all right there. Yeah, that's
All
why
right.
when you said, who's this for? The enterprise, government. Yes. Is it for a solopreneur? Yes. I would not try to do a startup without doing this stuff first, because I really want to understand what we're doing to support someone and make something that's really going to make a difference. It's really going to be of value to them, not that I think it's of value to me and it's a really cool instantiation of the latest tech.
Mm.
Right? Then you have to convince people to use it, and they'll use it for a little bit and then drop off.
And there's so many alternatives and solutions that can address, someone's mental model or thinking style. Like you need to make sure you're choosing the one that makes sense for them, with
Yeah.
the context of their story, their motivations, their inner thinking,
Yeah.
and all those things.
And to be clear, we're not doing it on a per person basis. We're doing it based on affinities. So that skyline, those are affinities of the things people go through, the stages people go through as they're addressing this purpose. The thinking styles, those are affinities of some like kind of their philosophical approach, I like to say, but that sounds weird. So it's kind of like the thing that's top of mind as they're doing this. So you go to the airport to try to catch the plane. I go to the airport to try to catch the plane. Someone else goes to the airport to try to catch the plane. And we all might have something different top of mind. Like you might be, oh, I'm going to give myself a lot of time so that I don't feel stressed. The other person might be, I'm going to make sure that I keep me and my kids from bothering anyone. And I might be, oh, just get me there as fast as possible. I want to have the least amount of time in the airport right? So these are our top of mind things. Those actually represent patterns. It's not just you, me, and this other person. We're representing, it's just the little thing. There's a lot of stuff that we have in common. Tons of stuff. Like, we got to make sure we've got stuff to eat before we get on that plane. We've got to, catch up on something while we're on the ground. Got to make sure we use the bathroom, right? All these things we have in common. We don't use those as thinking styles. The thinking styles are just the little part that's different between us.
And you have these examples on your site too, right? Like
Yeah.
examples of thinking styles,
Yeah.
like with the nice comics, like pushing past resistance.
Yeah. There's
Giving dignity and
also
agency.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, push back. Yeah, that was for the caretakers. So there's a nice comic there if you like comics. I have working with this great comic artist. And there's also on the explanations page, which will soon be the method page, a set. Actually, that's going to go on the researchers page. A set of talks that I've given, presentations. So my latest presentations have a lot of variety of examples in them. You can go through them at double speed just so you can see those examples.
When you started this book, I noticed in the beginning that you acknowledged someone around for the phrase rapt listening. Can you tell me a little bit about what you were thinking there?
The paying rapt attention.
Oh yeah, rapt attention. I
Okay.
think it was from someone who did a talk or workshop in a
Oh,
different conference.
yeah. So, yeah, I have been doing non-directed listening for the majority of my career. And I knew what non-directed listening was. I knew that I was not having a list of questions as I'm coming in. I knew that I'm trying to just follow where the person's going. Oh, and I need to talk about permeable boundaries. But I went to this workshop that Kevin Brooks conducted back in 2008, I think it was. And it was about storytelling. He's a master storyteller, or was a master storyteller. And he stopped us all and said, okay, I want you guys to pair up, and I want one of you to tell a story for 1 minute. And then I want us all to stop. And then I want the other person to tell the story for 1 minute. So, really loud in the room. Everybody's doing their 1 minute story. We stop, we do the 1 minute story. And then he asks, okay, what were you thinking when the other person was telling the story? And we're like, oh, I was thinking about how my experience was similar to that. And I was thinking, I wish I could stop them and ask this question, but I can't because he told me I couldn't. I was thinking about how they have this giant hair coming in their eyebrow, whatever. So everybody talked about what they were thinking, and Kevin Brooks says you weren't listening. You were active in your own mind. If you can let go of that cognitive activity in your own mind and latch on just to what that other person is saying, you will become a much better listener. It takes practice. At first, you won't be able to do it for more than like 2 minutes. Eventually, you can get up to 2 hours, but you won't be able to do it all the time. You have to be in the right mood. You have to be in the right frame of mind. I practice all the time. Like when I'm in the airport and I'm sitting there and someone, is doing something, I'll maybe, because we're in a safe space, I'll maybe say something to them and elicit an answer, and maybe we'll form a conversation and I'll turn it into a listening session just to practice.
Just to build the listening stamina.
Yeah. But imagine getting to the airport and you are stressed out or you're tired or you didn't sleep. Yeah, I know. Don't do it then, right? So, yeah, that's part of the reason why we only do one listening session a day, is that it's too stressful to listen to multiple people in that kind of rapt way, dropping your own cognition, following their story, and not letting other people's stories creep into your mind or your questions, creep into your mind. You're just following them. And at the same time, you're doing two other things. Hey, are they feeling safe? And hey, do I sense that they're really close to some interior cognition, and can I help them unfold it? If I help them unfold it enough times, they'll start unfolding it on their own.
Let's uncover that point about safety a bit. Like, what are techniques you use to make that happen?
Oh,
Or like just maybe just one, right?
okay.
Like,
Yeah,
because of
yeah,
course this is a whole course.
yeah. I know. 11 hours worth of a course. The whole last section is about this. But yeah, it's multi-layered. It starts in the intro session. When you're inside of a listening session, all the way there, you're inside of a listening session. What you want is trust, and you want to show them that you are not judging them. So a lot of it is just taking what they're saying and appreciating it. You might appreciate it by laughing along with them, or you might appreciate it by going, "Oh my gosh," or you might appreciate it by going, "Uh-huh, right, right." You might appreciate it in a lot of different ways, but you're just trying to show them that you're there with them. You're not being a quiet robot with like shifty eyes, perhaps judging the other person
Mm.
behind the mask. So the idea is to really be there for that person. And part of showing that you're paying attention is by using what they've said to help them unfold into the interior cognition. It's a technique that I call pull tabs. And
Mm.
often they're after you're done with a listening session, people will say, "Oh my gosh, that was so cathartic for me. That was so excellent. I've never had anybody listen to me like that. You really heard my words." And it's because of that rapt attention. It's because I'm using their words to maybe ask a little bit more about what went through their mind. I'm using them as
What's a
pull
good
tabs.
example of a pull tab? Like, let's say in that airport
Mm.
scenario.
I don't know. Let's say that you're taking your grandma to the airport and you're saying, "Yeah, and we need to get there 2 hours early."
Mm.
And there's probably a reason, there's probably a guiding principle behind that. And rather than I'll let you run on, and then I'll come back to it. And I said, "You get there 2 hours early. Can you tell me what went through your mind as you were organizing that?" Sometimes I'll just say, "And you need to get there 2 hours early." I'm just saying that that's what you mentioned, and I'm implying that I'm curious about it, and you might jump into an explanation of what went through your mind then.
The techniques that you've shared over the past years, I use it to build
Mm,
relationships, and it has transformed how I interact with people. And
fantastic.
the pull tabs are a core thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like
Mm-hmm.
it shows that you're listening. It fosters even more belonging. And even when I'm talking with my CEO, he's like, "Oh, we gotta leave by 7 a.m." Okay. What was on your mind when you wanted to leave at 7 a.m.?
Right.
Okay, you might have to set up for the community thing we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
blah blah blah. So the inner cognition things. These are techniques I personally find myself using it in the workplace a lot.
Yeah.
Something that's important to train, regardless of what you're doing.
Yes, exactly. It's so like mind blowing when I'll run a workshop for a team and I'll say, "Okay, what are the things you're saying to that other group?" Right. And then I break it down and I say, "Look, you're throwing commands at them and then opinions. And that's all you're doing. And if you could talk about what is behind that, you'll find most often than not, you both have very much the same cognition, very much the same guiding principles. You're just making assumptions and not going deep enough to understand the other person." Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm so glad that it's been useful. There's a woman named Pei-Ling Chin in
Mm,
Malaysia who uses this for her mentees, the people that
mm,
she mentors. And she can use it because she speaks with them month over month or quarter over quarter. she can use it to see how people are changing and how to change her own approach to match what this person's guiding principles are.
I see. It's a good feedback
Yeah.
to enhance your
She's
your approach
written
to
a couple
things.
of articles about it, so you might be able to find those.
Oh, what's your message to all of the tech consultants, founders listening to you right now?
We will soon have 10 billion people on the world, and what we're all at heart aiming to do is make life better for all 10 billion people eventually. It's a huge lift, but you're not lifting alone. There's a lot of us who are helping, who want to lend a hand, who have the same goals. And the people that you're lifting are also in it. The people you're lifting can help. They can lift themselves. They're humans too. So I think that it's just, we've got a lot of, if we think of it from the human or humanistic point of view, there's a lot that we can be positive about. If we only think of it from the climate point of view, well, but, maybe marrying climate with this human ability to try to solve problems and to try to make things better for other people will actually go together.
Thank you so much, Indi. It's such a pleasure listening to you.
Yeah.
So kind, so brilliant. And yeah.
So fun. And back at you. So kind, so brilliant.